Welcome back, 11:36. This is Chicago. Now, so Gabby, you and I started out the show talking a lot about breakups and things. Obviously, there was the Olympic medalist who made his winning speech about how he cheated on his girlfriend. That didn't work out well.
Why'd you have to bring it up again?
And then we talked about the breakup registries, which really ticked me off because why am I buying you a candle just because you got broken up with? But there is this expression that would probably make a lot of these people feel better. It's an expression we've all heard, which is time heals all wounds. But we've got some guests who say that actually might not be the case. A new book called The Art of Trust Building explores that idea and a lot more. And we're going to talk with the co-authors, Reina, PhD, and Michelle Reina, PhD. Guys, thank you for taking the time. We have so many questions, and I wish you could have heard the top of the show because we had some segments that would have tied perfectly into this. But let's just talk with the big one, which is this expression that we've all heard many times. In fact, we've had it either said to us or we've said it to other people. Time heals all wounds. You guys say, okay, hold on, maybe not exactly.
Well, first of all, Jake and Gabby, thank you so much for having us.
Of course,
Michelle
thank you for
and
joining us.
I are very honored to be here. So
Yes,
first,
thank you.
absolutely. Not really, and not for long. You see, what we have learned, and I've learned this the hard way through a very painful divorce many years ago, long before I met my bride here in graduate school. And we've been married for 33 years, but she's always my bride, right? I learned the hard way that, in fact, time will actually bury your problems or bury the challenge. And in fact, I was waiting and doing everything I could to save the marriage that I was previously in about 40 years ago. And it wasn't happening and it wasn't working. And the real healing starts when we're honest with ourselves, when we acknowledge what's happened and allow our feelings to surface. So, for example, it was a loss for me, not just to lose the marriage, it was a loss for me to lose my whole family. My boys at the time were 2 and 4. And, you know, I miss tucking them into bed every night. I miss taking them down to the school bus stop. I miss, you know, picking them up, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the greatest loss. And so for me, I had to do my inner work. And it was when I was honest with myself and I really acknowledged what had happened and the impact on what had happened, not only to me, but to others. That's when the healing point started. That was a turning point in my relationship with myself and then with others. And through that, it changed my perspective. It changed my outlook. And it actually gave me my life's work.
You know, is there a value in, and I think you sort of touched on this, you know, we talk about, you know, these wounds that need to heal, and the danger of that is that we're burying them. Is there a value in not ignoring them and learning from them and acknowledging them and saying, listen, yes, this thing happened to me, but I'm not going to try to forget it. I'm not going to try to move on. In fact, I'm going to acknowledge it, put it front and center, and because of this wound, I can actually become a better person.
I think that's actually the key, Jake. You know, it's about honoring ourselves and honoring our life experience. And, you know, a key component of healing is doing exactly what you're talking about, is acknowledging it, giving it attention, not to wallow in it, but to learn from it. We really do need to acknowledge what has happened and give ourselves the permission to come to understand it. Get in tune with the impact on us and the feelings and emotions associated with it. That's when it becomes a stepping stone to actually move us forward in our life in ways that bring deeper meaning and progression.
All right, so we saw a cover of your beautiful book, The Art of Trust Building. Tell us how this book kind of takes someone through maybe this healing process. What are some of the stories you tell? You know, is there little key quotes in there? What's inside?
Well, there's plenty inside for sure. I mean, we first start out with describing what trust is and our capacity for trust, because that's at the heart. Our capacity for trust is our willingness and our readiness to trust ourselves and to trust others. And that's where it all starts. That's really at the core. And then from there, we go on to the 3 dimensions of trust and list those out. And then we go into how trust is broken and how trust is rebuilt, and then how to take it to that next level. So we go through a whole progression. But what is important is that trust is often talked about in the abstract. It's often talked about in the conceptual. And what we do in the book, we make it concrete, behavioral, and actionable. And that's what's key, is because people really need to understand what are those behaviors that build trust and those that break trust. And then how do you rebuild trust and move on to that next level?
You know, to that point, you know, we've talked a lot about breakups, not just in this segment, but earlier in the show as well. And a lot of times coming out of a breakup, there's someone who feels like they were wronged. And then there's sometimes the person who knows that they were the one who did the wrong. Are those 2 different paths to trusting, or are they similar steps depending where it's not, doesn't matter which side of the coin you fall on?
You know, they're actually in many ways parallel, Jake, and I love that question. And in the book, by the way, it's chock full of stories and examples, because we all have life stories about trust, the building of it and the loss of it. You know, but a key component to trust building is when we do acknowledge what has happened, the impact on us. But you know, there's a turning point question when we also look for what might have been our role. Is there something we might have done or something we might have said that contributed to that breakdown? That's a degree of real honesty with ourselves that's essential in this whole aspect of healing. We might not have had a contribution to what happened, but we sure do have a responsibility for how we respond and how we move forward in our life and our relationships with one another.
And those 3 questions, actually, you know, betrayal may take something from you, but those 3 questions may actually help empower you and take your power back. Because so often when we're feeling betrayed, we're feeling powerless. And what those 3 questions do is really help frame, okay, what happened? What is my role? And what are the choices and opportunities that I now have that I can take and move forward?
Interesting. I want to ask you too, you know, beyond maybe you went through something traumatic, a breakup, whatever it might be, maybe you're in a healthy relationship now and you still want to strengthen that trust. You know, do you have some advice for people at home who just want to, you know, build up what they have as a healthy base?
You know, absolutely, because, you know, often when we think about trust breaking down, we think of big things. But, you know, through our years of research, what we found is tiny little things that can build up. Actually, in the book, we provide a gift to the reader, which is a self-assessment. And it's intended to do exactly what you're asking about, Gabby, because the most powerful thing we can do to help continue to strengthen trust is to really pay attention to what's at play in our relationships. Are there needs that we have that perhaps haven't been spoken? Are there ways that we might be letting each other down that we don't really know? Are we supporting one another in the healthiest way for our goals and objectives? When we trip up and we make a mistake, how do we pick ourselves up and learn from those mistakes and continue to move forward? Trust in our relationships is something we can never take our eye off the ball. So Dennis and I were very intentional about equipping this book with a self-assessment to help us all tune into how are we doing and where do we have those opportunities to strengthen and tool ourselves up a bit more fully.
And what the assessment does is really give each and every one of us a starting point, because we want to not only know what builds trust, but we also want to know what are those things that get in the way, those little things, but they add up and they accumulate. And then one day people walk out the door. They either leave the job, they leave the marriage, you know, whatever, or worse yet, they stay. And then either if it's at work, they become the working wounded, or the marriage dies, but yet it's like quiet quitting.
You know, we have just about a minute left, but I wanted to end with this question. You know, God knows I've gone through breakups. A lot of people at home have gone through breakups. And I have found personally that the most valuable thing that I can do for myself is learn to be okay with just me again, to learn to be okay living alone, to be okay not going out on a Friday night, to be okay with just me. And I've got to kind of get myself there before I can start looking elsewhere. So how much, we talk a lot about trust and trusting other people. How much does trusting yourself play a role in this?
It's the starting point.
Absolutely.
It's the starting point, and it's one of the, the outgrowths of when we do give ourselves permission to acknowledge what has happened in healing. Mm-hmm. That outgrowth of healing, Jake, is that we deepen our relationship with ourselves, and we do come to know ourselves more fully, and we gain that deeper level of trust within ourselves, and we have compassion for ourselves. And rather than beating ourselves up, we begin to say, we're okay. I'm okay. I'm going to learn and embrace what I discovered through that process, because at the end of the day, where it all begins is with our relationship with ourselves. That's the starting point for how we bring ourselves forward to others.
Love that.
And we may forgive or not, but you don't want to forget the lessons learned.
That's true.
Very true.
Thank you two so much for your time. I think you've switched a lot of mindsets in a really positive way.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating conversation.
For people who are interested at home, where can they find The Art of Trust Building, and maybe where can they find some more of your advice online?
Oh, we'd love to hear from people at our website, which is www.reinatrustbuilding.com. And our book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and through our website. And thank you both so much
for
the opportunity.
Great conversation. We appreciate you joining us. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. 2 minutes.